It's not about me. It's about us. It's about how good a teammate are you? And then when you open your heart, that's where the power comes from.
What if I told you there was a gym you can train in that can optimize your performance, help you eliminate old baggage and triggers, sharpen your focus, and radically increase a feeling of ease and well-being during every visit? Now, what if I told you that you already hold the keys to that gym?
Discovering your true self can be the most exciting adventure of your life. If you have the courage to look deep within, face your fears, and overcome your self-limiting beliefs.
Welcome to the most exciting adventure of your life. Welcome to a new way of living, and welcome to the 5 Mountain Adventures podcast.
Hi, I'm Casey.
And I'm Andy. We're on a mission to inspire and guide 1 million people to live a life of purpose, passion, and self-mastery, leveraging the 5 mountains of cutting-edge human development: physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual, to build unshakable mental fitness. If you're looking for the Fierce Planet Adventures podcast, you're in the right place. We've changed the name of our podcast to reflect and align with our coaching platforms. If you've enjoyed seeing and hearing about our outdoor adventures, you can still find them on our Fierce Planet Adventures socials, especially Instagram.
Today, we welcome Jim Brault. He spent over 40 years searching out the best methods to train the mind. He ran one of the top Tony Robbins franchises and was CEO of Navy SEAL Commander Mark Devine's Unbeatable Mind and SEAL Fit companies. He's certified in breathwork, yoga, hypnotherapy, has multiple black belts, and was a Fortune 500 CHRO. He's currently pursuing his doctorate in psychology and is the author of 4 books, including Easy Makes Us Weak. He's a sought-after coach and the creator of Mind Jim Brault, a fun and easy-to-use app to help you train your mind for the life you want. Welcome, Jim.
Hey, thanks so much.
Excited
Great to be here.
It's great to finally have you on. I think synchronicity, right? This has actually been something that's probably been in the making for about 4 years, but given the different roles we've been in and positions, we just couldn't make it quite fit yet. So this is our first podcast of fall 2022, and it's great to start off strong.
Hey, again, thanks for having me here. Love your podcast. You guys do a great job.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. And well, as you know, we like to start out with a little ice-breaking question, and we changed that up for this season. And Jim, what are you most curious about right now?
Wow, that is an icebreaker. You know, I'm as you mentioned, I'm going back to school for my doctorate. I just turned 60, so maybe by 65, I'll have that. And you know, I'm so curious about different approaches to help people in kind of the mental wellness. You know, we're seeing a lot of mental illness, and that's a spectrum, right? But I think, as you guys mentioned before, COVID, just a lot of anxiety, sort of low level around the world. And so how to help people do that, and what ways are most effective, and what works for different populations. And so that's what I'm really curious about. And, you know, I've had the great fortune of working with some phenomenal teachers. So, you know, Qigong, yoga, breath work, Tony Robbins, you know, I knew him and worked with him for 4 years. Great guy. Of course, Commander Divine, and then also other work. And I look at him and go, well, what if you could combine all these things? You know, because like when we do breath work, some people do breath work, or they do yoga, or they do therapy, or they do different things. But I always like to combine them. You know, I was like, well, but that works, but this works too, and this is a little different. So that's I'm just very curious about that.
I love that idea too, of playing with different modalities, and the more tools we have to dip into, the more options we have for the different personalities. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and you know, it kind of parallels, there's much more openness now. If you think about martial arts, used to be like you did one style. And they tend to be in a certain range, you know, kicking range, striking range, trapping range, or grappling range. And I think Bruce Lee was probably the first one. If you think about Enter the Dragon, you know, he was fighting, he had those big gloves on, he was doing grappling in addition to stand-up work. And so now I don't think people say, hey, our way is the best way. It's useful for these situations. I think of mental wellness the same way. Like breath work absolutely is great. Yoga is great, right? Using all your senses is great. Going back in time and forward in time, hypnotherapy, they're all great. But if you go, like a lot of people have this view of, well, I don't want to do that. Or this kind of person does this and I don't want to do that, but I like that. But when you train across modalities, then you see like there's value in all those, but you have to make it appetizing, right? So people will try it out.
Yeah. Remain curious, right? So Jim, we just both finished reading one of your books, Easy Makes Us Weak, which highlights your experience during, I'm going to call it the hardest civilian crucible on the planet, SEAL Fit Kokoro, which is like a 50-ish hour crucible. It simulates the fabled SEAL Bud's Hell Week.
Yeah.
Would you paint us a picture of what SEAL Fit Kokoro is and what it means to finish?
Yeah. Well, Easy Makes Us Weak was actually Commander Mark Devine's words. There were 2 points, so it's about 50 hours, and it was designed after Navy SEAL Hell Week. And the class I was in, we had 10 people start and 3 people finished. It was the smallest graduating class up till then. And the 2 other guys that finished were 18 and 21 at the time. And they're both now Navy SEALs. One's in SEAL Team 2, one's in SEAL Team 8. After about 15 hours, there were 3 of us. Everyone else dropped. And we had between 2 and 7 coaches for us 3. So we got a lot of individual attention. And because both those guys were SEAL candidates, they were like really pressing them. And I got the bonus. So I was a month shy of 55 at the time. So I was older than their, parents. But I would say 2 things. Even SEALFIT says, it's the toughest training on the planet, but they're shifting that. And I think that's smart to say it's the most transformative training on the planet. Because honestly, anyone can make it hard, just do more, or make it colder or hotter or longer. That's easy. That's easy to turn that dial up to make it harder. But to make it transformative, you really have to know, what you're doing. And one thing, like Mark Devine was a Navy SEAL officer. His entire original boat crew got through BUDS. And if you calculate the odds, it's less than 1 in a million. No one's ever done that before.
It's an amazing
because
thing.
the statistics would say out of those 7, 1 person will make it. But to have all those 7 make it, so he knew how to pull together a team, and that's that transformative part. So I would say most people go in, like my 2 friends, to test, to get ready for Navy SEAL training, BUDS, and then SEAL qualification training, or SQT. Like they want to be prepared. There's sort of that. And we had 2 other guys wanted to be SEALs. They dropped. 1 guy wanted to be Marine Recon, which is really hard. He dropped in like 2 hours. Granted, these were kids. They're, teenagers, early 20s. So, hey, good on them to even go there, right? But,
Right.
I think they got a wake-up call really fast, because I don't want to say harder physically, mentally is where people drop, not because it's, oh my God, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I think most people come in like, do I have what it takes? Basically, am I tough enough? But that doesn't last very long, because you find out in a way you're tougher than you think you are, and then you're not as tough as you think you are, right? But at some point, and this is a transformation, you go from like my friend Brian Bible says, ego to we go.
Yeah.
So you go from, can I do it? Can I ramble through it? Am I good enough? I'm going to crush this too. It's not about me. It's about us. It's about how good a teammate are you? And then when you open your heart that's where the power comes from. Because you're so tired. You're like, oh, like I've never been up 2 nights straight. Like I've been one, like flying or whatever. The kids are sick, but never 2 nights, and then training nonstop. Like I never did that. But when you open your heart and you start to care about other people more than yourself, that's the transformation. And that never goes back. I mean, to train at that level, it's kind of unsustainable if you have a job and, a spouse.
Right.
It's like you're really training like physically probably 4 hours a day, and then mentally more. And you're doing your cold water stuff, your heat stuff, your mind gym stuff. So it's not really sustainable to do that much training unless that's your job, unless that's your full-time thing. But so that'll sort of ramp down. But your heart opening, that's like it stays open.
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest surprise for people. They think it's like, oh, how tough am I? And it's like, no, wrong door. How open can I be, and how good a teammate? Now that's the lesson.
Yeah, 100%. Right. I was thinking back to as I was reading your book, I was thinking back to my experience in Marine Corps boot camp. And right out of the gate, right, it's shell shock. It's off. You're off balance. You're out of sorts. And probably the first couple of weeks, you're pretty much just trying to figure out your own new reality.
Yeah.
But as you progress through the different evolutions, you start to work and bond as a team. Fire teams, squads, platoon, and you really you end up having the other guys back next to you, right? It's about coming together, pulling together for mission completion, as opposed to, being what we see in all the movies is that lone wolf guy. And that's just, that's silly. It's fictitious. But one of the neat things that you highlighted in the book was just kind of a lightness and humor. And how does that play into the mental side of things?
Yeah, that's a great point. So one, like, you gotta laugh, because I mean, it's cool, but it totally sucks. And I remember one of the guys, he's a team guy now. I didn't use their real names in the book. We were down doing something, and I look over at him and he's smiling. He looks over at me, and I was smiling like, this is cool. All we have to do is train. Like, this is so fun, versus others. I remember I met a guy at the hotel, and we were having breakfast, and you're like sort of nervous. You got your shirts on and your boonie and everything, and you're like, should I eat a lot or not so much? You don't know. And he had run cross country in college, so the guy knew how to run. He had 2 young sons. He was like 40, just turned 40. He had his son's name in ink, like he was doing it to be a better dad. And so he definitely knew how to run. He quit. So we run in, and then they do breakout, which sort of simulates the chaos of war. He dropped in like 20 minutes.
Wow.
And it's like, there's no way you trained, you probably, we ran for a little bit, and then we started doing it. So total training time was maybe 40 minutes, like, dude, you trained for a long time, but yeah, that's, so I think what happens is people get tense, and then their mind starts going. So we have 3 parts of our brain, but the limbic system and mammalian brain are older. And so those 2 are the emotional brain. And then we have our neo, or new cortex, right? The sort of logical, higher level thinking. Our emotional brain is faster than our cognitive brain. Like it gets signals faster, a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. So that's like, if you put your finger on a hot stove, you pull it back before you consciously think, oh, that's hot, right? You're like, and then you're like, oh, I just got burned. Same thing. Like, the first thing that happens is not a thought. It's a feeling. It's a sensation. And most people, like, it's some tension, if it's a stress thing, they tense up, like they're trying to make yourself a smaller target. They tense like they're going to get hit, pull in, And then your breath changes. You probably feel like kind of darkness, kind of heavy. Your energy contracts. And then you might say something like, this again, or I can't, whatever. And then that leads to a certain train of thought, which for a lot of people is hard to derail, because you're already going, like your emotional brain is already down the tracks, and you're like, wait, but that doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, it rarely does. Like, afterwards you're like, what happened? What did I do?
Come back.
Yeah,
What just
like
happened?
I can't believe I said that. So first of all, it's like, one thing, it's supposed to be hard. Like if you wouldn't go through it and go, oh, that was easy, no problem. It's like, no, this should get you like, oh, like you have to rely on other people, but also you like make jokes like, yeah, that went well. Or like, what a jerk, like you're like, that coach is horrible, you're like, he's so crabby, like, dude. Or like, there's decaffeinated as well, you don't always have to have caffeinated. So I think you just got to make jokes to get through it, because it is pretty funny, actually. And I think most people, it's sort of that gallows humor,
Right,
but it gets you through.
When I think about energy and vitality, I think about a kid. They have the energy to play, run around, climb things. That energy that feels like you just can't contain yourself. It's the stuff we've always wished they could just bottle up and sell to us, right? Well, this company's found a way to do just that. Amari's Happy Juice Pack. Mood, motivation, energy, things our bodies can naturally produce when both our guts and our brains are happy and communicating. And we can actually improve that process of communication across the axis of the gut and the brain. This is cutting-edge science. This is game-changing information. This is where science meets soul. This is Amari, and we're helping people feel better naturally. Boost your serotonin and GABA. Balance your neurotransmitters. Nourish your gut. The things that make you want to do. Start feeling better the natural way. Check out the links in the show notes for discounts and more information.
Yeah, well, there's a time to be serious, right? And to take what you're working on seriously, but that doesn't mean you can't have fun with it.
Yeah.
At least that's what I've noticed.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that you mentioned in the book, and that we engage in Unbeatable Mind training, is the Navy SEAL Mental Toughness Tools. And I don't know that a lot of people are familiar with that. Would you walk us through what that looks like?
Sure. So they call them the big four of mental toughness. The first one is really using your breath. Most adults breathe 16 to 20 times a minute, and that corresponds to different brainwave patterns. So that rate of breathing, for the most part, corresponds to beta. It's just a speed of, hertz. If you slow that down, you relax more, you get into kind of alpha brainwaves, and you're more creative. You have more neurochemicals, flooding your brain, and you can remember things better. If you go on even further, slowing your breath down to maybe 1 to 3 breaths a minute, which might seem like a lot, but with a little training, you can get there easily. Now you're starting to get down in the theta, which is even slower, and you have access to your subconscious mind. And it's like you're aware of things, but they don't really bother you. Like if you've ever had like anesthesia for surgery or something, it's like you feel it, but you're like, you just don't have an emotion around it.
Right.
Okay, so we'll come back to this, but maybe just a point. Most psychologists would say that our belief systems are set between ages 2 and 7. The primary brainwave pattern between ages 2 and 7 is theta. So if you say, well, I have this belief that was set when I was young, and then you're like an adult and you're trying to change it, that's like going, oh, I have this iPhone how do I play my 8-track tape in this?
Mm.
They're like, you don't. You got to convert it backwards, right? It's got to be backwards compatible because you're trying to fix something in a system that it wasn't built in. So you got to go back. But let's pop back up. So one is breath control. If you think about if someone's having a panic attack, how do they breathe? Right? If you
Shallow,
breathe like
fast.
that, you're like, I'm going to die. And so you have the corresponding, physiological and mental reaction. You're like, I want to stop. I want to get out of here. I want to run away.
Mm-hmm.
But when you slow your breath down, you breathe full, you breathe with your low belly, you relax. And you're like, okay, we got this. So we teach people how to breathe. Sometimes it's to get your energy up. Sometimes it's to balance your left and right hemisphere. Sometimes it's to relax. And you guys teach this to your clients too.
Mm-hmm.
That's number one. Second is positivity. Positivity could be how you stand. Like if I'm like, yeah, I think I can do it. My body's saying, no, you can't,
Yeah.
right? But if you're like, yeah, I got this, or we got this. Or how do you use your voice? If you're like, oh, I'm really happy to be on your podcast. You'd be like, what? It doesn't sound like you are, right? I could say the words, but so it's your voice quality, it's your physiology, but it's also your inner dialogue. Most people's inner dialogue is super negative,
Mm-hmm.
super negative. It's super critical. And I like what Mark says, Mark Divine, negativity destroys performance. So we train, whether it's a mantra, easy day, piece of cake, we got this, hoo-yah. And some people are like, why do you do that? All right, dude, let it go by itself. You tell me what you say. I can't do this. Oh my God, I'm going to die. But it's like,
Right,
it'll go
right.
negative. So you train that positivity, just like you would train a lunge or a squat or pull up, whatever. You train that or not,
Mhm.
but don't train it and tell me how your life goes. Let me know how that ends. Cause
Yeah.
I don't think
Right.
it's going to be ideal. That's number two. Number three, and this is visualization. And I would expand that to use all 6 senses. This is the one that people do the least. That's why I created Mind Jim Bro, because I just saw, even with people that invest a lot of money and time, they don't do it. They're like, I can't visualize. Well, yeah, you can. It's a skill, but go
Yeah.
beyond just what you see. What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you feel? What do you taste? How's your energy moving? What colors are present? What does the voice sound like? Where are you? Are you with people? Not. So that's visualizing success, rehearsing success. And the last one is goals and micro goals. So imagine if you're running and you're really tired. You wouldn't go, oh, I got 7 miles left, because you'd be like, oh, I don't want to do it.
I'm
But if you
done.
go, make it to that next mailbox, or make it to the next tree or telephone pole, or wherever you're running, now you just have, okay, just do that and just do that. Or you can count steps, or, hey, one day at a time. So those are the big 4 mental toughness. We kind of add another one. We said if there was a fifth, it would be FOO, F-O-O, focus on others.
Mhm.
So if you're tired and you start to go in, which a lot of people do, like they're stressed, they're anxious, they curl in, right? They retreat, they isolate. And it doesn't get better, right? It doesn't get better. They don't reach out. So focus on others. So if you're having trouble, it's like, hey, how you doing? What can I do to help? Take their pack, literally or metaphorically.
Mhm.
So the big 4, and then the fifth, which is just a brilliant way to live. Focus on other people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to tell a little story here. We were at the 3 of us, not together, but we were together at the Unbeatable Mind Experience back in 2019. And one of the things we did was the ice bath. And Casey and I were up to do the ice bath, and you were there to kind of coach and support and work with us there. And I was having a really hard time getting my breath in line. And one of the things that I was not doing was I was not focusing on Casey, and we were not getting our breath in sync. And so you gave me a gentle nudge in that direction. Hey, focus on Casey, get your breath in line. And as soon as we did that, it became much easier to submerge our heads underwater and stay under there for, was it the 10 or 20 seconds that we did that? And, that may not sound like a lot of time, but when you're under ice cold water, it seems like a little bit longer than it is. So I think my point there is it certainly punctuates what you just said about focusing on others and bringing your attention back to a positive state as opposed to maybe a panicked state.
Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed is with myself first, but also with clients, is there's a conceptual understanding of the big four or the big five of mental toughness, but it's a whole different level of understanding when you actually put it into practice and train it and have to rely on it. What does that look like? Can you give us an example from Kokoro when you put that into practice?
Well, I think, Andy, you just gave a great example. You can talk all day long, get in the ice bath. I've done it dozens of times. It's still a shock. You're like, mm-hmm. So it's a beautiful managed stress environment, because I don't care who you are, how much time you've trained, it's still cold, it's real. So you get there, and it's hard to breathe, right? It's physically hard to breathe, or you're like, hey, my waist is good. Then you go like, oh, and you thought you were cool. You're like, yeah, I got this. All of a sudden you're like, and you're like, wow, that's harder. I can't breathe. And then what happens a lot of times when people go under, because you have so many nerve endings in your head, people freak, right? Or they might have had like your drowning accident or brings up memories. But it's a great example because now it's not about talking. It's not about, yeah, I did great. How you doing now? You're not controlling it. It's cold. And so then you have to train, you have to use the skills, because if you don't have to, you won't. Or you're like, I don't know how I'd really do, right? Think about your Marine Corps training. It's not, well, I think I'll do this. No, you have to know. You have to know, in that situation, I'm able to do whatever. Move, shoot, run, and also I got my head on a swivel. I'm looking at other people. I'm not just doing this, because that'll get you killed. Yeah. Right? Go out, look around. That's a trained response. Same thing. You're like, oh, I feel bad. Good. Look at your wife. Oh, wow. She's doing pretty good. Right?
She was.
Or you could look at her eyes. Blue eyes are so nice. Or, hey, she's probably cold too. Let me help her. Now it's not contracting. You're just energetically, you're going out, you're expanding. So we always tell people, guys, a crucible will show up, and is not the one you want. Whether that's, my youngest brother just like 6 months ago, found out he had leukemia. Yeah, not a crucible he wanted.
Right.
Or whatever, COVID, financially, relationship, whatever. So how do you train yourself and bring those crucibles to yourself? And you got to make it hard. If it's like, yeah, no problem, it's going to be hard, but I know I can do it. No, you got to do something that scares you a little bit, and it's going to be hard.
Right.
Because then you have to use those skills, right? When you're having trouble getting your breath, whether it's because you're running, whether it's because you got a buddy carry, you got to make like we had a down pilot, and we're like, we had like 3/4 mile, and they say, you guys have, I think 4 minutes, something like, it was fast, like super, I mean, for me anyway, because we had been going for like 30 hours, and they go, and it was like 3/4 miles down and then up a hill. You guys have 4 minutes to get there, or else that guy's going to be captured and tortured. And I'm thinking, what if it were my son? And I took off, and I was definitely not the fastest runner, although they were faster runners than me. But I won, again, not because I'm a great runner, because I thought, what if this were my son? I would not hold back. You just have to.
Right.
You have to save them. So now you're focused on other people. So if you just go, can you run 3/4 of a mile in 4 minutes when you're tired and it's uphill? I'd be like, no, I'm not that fast.
Yeah. Right.
But that was not an option, right? Like you have to. So, and it could be stop drinking for a month, or, do a silent retreat, or call that person, you know who that person is. That could be a crucible. It doesn't have to be all physical. But in each of those mountains, there's ways to stretch yourself, because then you have to do something, right? Or either you'll get out of the proverbial ice bath. So we always say, guys, do an ice bath, don't do an ice bath. Nobody cares. Like, it's cool to you, but everyone else would be like, oh, that's nice. Like, I ran a triathlon. Oh, no, good.
Super great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Yeah.
Yeah. Why would you do that? But if you take that and go, how can you train yourself for those ice bath moments in your life? That's useful. So what did you use to get through the ice bath? Boom. Now take that to your own life, to your own battlefield, if you will, for those ice bath moments, and the ones that take your breath away, the ones that you did not ask for and you do not want, but they're there. Hoo-yah, now what?
And it's going to happen, right? It's not if, it's when. And we all walk through that, experience those.
Yeah, exactly.
Jim, one of the mountains we trained is the emotional mountain. It's the third mountain. And I've found that this is the mountain that tends to be the most difficult for many people, especially guys, right? And I think it's also the mountain that can yield the largest return. What do you think the importance of this mountain is, and why do so many people find this mountain so challenging?
Yeah. Oh, it's a great question. So first of all, it's the Everest of the mountains. It is the hardest by far for definitely for guys, but for a lot of people. And the reason why we go across all 5 mountains, someone will go, oh, I'll go run another marathon. Okay, that's hard, but it's easier for you than doing the emotional work. So there's a few reasons. One, I don't think most of us, had great role models of emotions, most guys, you're pissed off, you're psyched, you got like 3 emotions. You're like, yeah, okay, that's like when you're a little kid, you got red, yellow, and blue,
Maybe
or green, I guess, right? And so you have those 3 primary colors. Well, great. There's thousands of emotions. So first of all, what do you really feel? Because it's easier to say you're angry than I'm disappointed, or I'm hurt, or I'm lonely, or I'm uncertain. And even culturally, we're often like, hey, be confident. Like my dad, super confident. And he, like, you can do anything you want, which is great. Like, it's very encouraging. But what I was never allowed to do, or any of us, was show that you're never certain, or you're sad, or anything. It's like, no, you're always upbeat. You're always confident. We're like, all right, really? I don't always feel like that. So I think, first of all, like, to realize you may be on the bunny slope of that mountain. You're not at the same level. So just start slow, right? If you're a new skier, you don't go on a black diamond. You get on the bunny hill. And even if there's little kids passing you, you're like, all right, well, I got to practice, right? So 1 is just having the familiarity. 2 is being okay with that. Like, sit in that emotion for a little while, and then try to understand, like, is it something that's going to pass, or is it a pattern? Is it a pattern that you've learned? And what benefit is there to that pattern? And then there's also, like, we have emotions, and then we have the emotions about the emotion. Like, we judge the emotion. We're like, oh, I shouldn't be this. And then you have an emotion, you feel, ashamed because you're ashamed, or you feel guilty because you're guilty, or whatever. Or even, like, I think, and you probably saw this in the Marine Corps, it's like, yeah, you got to be tough. Cool. But you're also human. You need downtime. You need that self-soothing. And some people self-soothe through alcohol or drugs or sex or binge watching, whatever, or sitting on the couch and eating ice cream. And then they judge it and go, all right, well, take the judgment away. What are you really trying to do? You know, shut off a lot of outside stimuli, maybe go in a little bit, soothe, relax. That's a good thing. Now, the way you're doing it may have some implications that you don't love, but let's not make it wrong. Let's just saying, hey, maybe there's a part of you that knows what it's doing, and in the way you consciously decide to soothe, there may be some better ways. So I think, and you mentioned it before, Andy, like you see movies and like everyone's Rambo, everyone's tough. It's like, that's not real. That's not real. You know, first of all, it's a team. I was like, yeah, that went well. Right. They're like, I have no idea. I have no clue. I have no idea, but let's think about it. Or what do you think? So I think just being more honest, like we did one of the things in I have a couple boat crews, and for 2 months, every day, you just list out your top 3 emotions. And first of all, if you use the same words all the time, like expand your emotional vocabulary, right? But then also, is there a pattern? Like one of the guys said, you know, I was frustrated about something and I put that down. The next day, I put frustrated again. And the third day, I'm like, wait a minute, I have to change this. Like, why am I going to be frustrated for 3 days in a row? Because that can become a pattern. So I think most of us don't have good role models. We don't have the facility of language around emotions. We don't take the time to feel them. You know, it's just like, suck it up. Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, there's a point where you need to suck it up. But I remember one of the guys, so this was in Kokoro, it was the second night. So it was, I don't know, like 6 or 7. It was hot. It was like in the 90s. And you're just out, there's no shade. So, you know, it was hot. There was 3 of us. These guys were SEAL candidates, got a lot of individual attention. So anyway, we're doing different stuff in the mud, you know, hoses and everything. You know, you can never do anything right. And we were supposed to do planks. And this guy says, guys, I suck at planks. If you remember reading it, he goes, I suck at planks. And we're like, cool. So I got on one side, like I put my shoulder under his and put my leg under his, you know, leg. And the other guy did the same thing. It's like, just relax, take it easy. And then we're like, because if he didn't tell us, he would have kept going down and we would have been there forever. But I loved it. He was like, hey guys, I suck at plank. Cool. Later, the next day, the next morning, I'm like, guys, I need help. Like we kept running. I was like, oh no. And then it sort of opens you up to go, hey, I need some help. That's real strength. But I think that's where you learn. Like one of the things we say, ready to lead, ready to follow. Most people are not good followers, right? They're sometimes good leaders, but not good followers. And part of it is like, I think people trust you more if you show a range of emotions. You know, but also, at first, if you don't really express them, it's kind of like a hose. You kink up, you know, and then when you let it go, it just flows out, and then it'll go the normal pace. But I think a lot of people, they hold it in for so long, then when they actually do let something go, it just like overwhelms them and overwhelms other people. So it's just like anything. If you didn't ever train physically and you trained, you'd be sore. Right? It'd be hard, but after a while you get used to it, then you're not really sore anymore. So I think emotions are the same way.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes absolute sense to me, right? And that's parallels my experience, right? Because that's definitely the mountain that I lean into the most and have the biggest challenge in. You know, as unbeatable coaches or unbeatable mind coaches, you know, we're fellow travelers on this journey with our clients, right? There's never a finish line. We're never done learning and expanding and growing. With that in mind, you've got a few new tools that I'm very curious about, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about the you touched on it before, brain backward compatible, and then Why do we need to visit our 7-year-old self? I'm very curious about that.
So some of the work that I do with clients is going back in time. It's super powerful. So they'll have some behavior that shows up in their lives now. And I always have the sense that that started somewhere. I don't know where. I mean, I don't know where and when and what happened, but I can see they've had a set of beliefs and a set of behavioral patterns that are not really super useful for them. So we go back in time. And so we have them identify, like, what's an emotion that you have that you don't really want, like doesn't like confrontation or feels like they're never good enough. That's a really common, like, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
So we go back, we kind of get them in a relaxed setting and they time travel and they go back, and it's not necessarily 7 years old, but it's pretty much between 4 and 7. And go back to the very first time you remember that. So actually you go a day before, and it's amazing. They're like, oh, I'm playing with this truck. I've got this outfit on. My mom's there. Like they can remember it. And then, okay, go to that day of that thing that happened. And sometimes it's, it's not what you would call abuse. It was just like, okay, that was probably intense for a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. Like that's a lot to, try to process. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, yeah, someone was beating you. It's like, oh, wow, okay.
Right.
But then you, with your adult self, go back and you're like, all right, what do you want to say? Do you want to intervene between your little person and that adult? Or do you want to comfort that, explain it? And it's generally very emotional for people, right?
Yeah.
And then we go, when's the next time? And again, a pattern is usually around 11 to 13, sort of that, middle school to high school. And then it's usually again around early 20s. So I've seen that in a lot of people, sort of those 3 distinct points. And they look at it, and each time their adult self is with them, and then they go back in the mind gym, and then that 5-year-old self goes back inside the, let's say, 12-year-old and then 21-year-old. And now they kind of shined a flashlight on it. So it's not this thing that happened, it's like, hey, what did you learn? And what did you start to believe that doesn't make sense to believe anymore? Because you forget stuff all the time, right? Someone introduces themselves, you're like, oh, like even said their name, you're like, I have no idea what that is. Right. And we forget all the time.
Yeah.
Instantly forget. So you can forget this too. And what do you want to remember now is this new belief, because you can say, oh, it wasn't my fault. Right. Okay. Logically, you can say that, but you got to go back to that theta brainwave to go backwards and go, okay, that's where you need to fix that, not up here. Because consciously, that doesn't make sense. You're like, nah, right. It's not my fault.
Yeah. So I'm curious, does that work best if your client is in a theta brainwave state when you do this exercise, or does it have to be?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, so even like cognitive behavioral therapy or internal family systems therapy, you don't have to be. You don't have to be. My experience is there's got to be a lot of trust. It's better if they're a little relaxed. So there's different schools of thought. Like some will never go backwards. It's just forward solutions. And I think that's valuable too.
Right.
I found with my clients though, it's like a weight's lifted off their shoulder. They don't have to keep going back to it, but it's like, oh, okay, yeah, you had that experience. You made it mean something that it doesn't necessarily have to mean. It could mean something else. You could create a new story.
Right.
And you think like narrative therapy. It's like, well, what's a story you created? Well, you can write a new story.
So something else we were looking at, which probably goes along with this system is the 24/6 system.
Yeah.
How does that come into play and how do you utilize that?
Yeah. Thanks, Casey. So Mind Jim Bro, so my name, right? But Mind Jim, sort of just to keep it light.
I love it, right?
So we have 20, the number 24 and 6. So 20 is 20 minutes. Research shows that to get in that rest and relax state, the parasympathetic state is best. The best results come from between 16 and 20 minutes of breath work, of meditation. It's not that less is not useful, but the best results come at around 16 to 20 minutes. And I know, like I would tell people, hey, how's your box breathing? And I either get great or okay. And to a person, I said, I already know the answer. I said, oh, how long do you practice? They're like, a couple times a week for like 5 minutes. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. Like if you wanted to play the piano and I said, how you doing? They're like, yeah, not that good. Why? I practice 5 minutes a day for 3 days a week. Like, okay. Right. So first of all, it's 20 minutes. And in the Mind Jim Bro app, they're all around 20 minutes. 4 is the 3 dimensions of space, right? So up and down, side to side. And then 4th, going backwards and forwards in time. Because if you have triggers, it's always something that happened in the past. But when you go forward, then you could say, well, do I want to take that in and keep holding on to that or bring it back? So it's fun to play with time going back and forth. And then 6 is 6 senses. So remember when I talked about the big 4 and visualization? Great. That's one sense. Takes a lot of real estate in your brain, but so does hearing. So does smelling. Smelling's huge. Think about all the memories you have associated to smell. And then touch, both externally or wind or sun or temperature, like the cold ice bath, or interoception, like how do you feel inside? And then you get into things like qigong and moving the energy. So I use all 6 senses. The reason is, let's say you have a behavior that you want to stop and you're like, okay, I'm going to write down my new behavior. Good. But it's kind of logical. So if you have, like a past behavior, you tense in a certain way, you breathe in a certain way, you think in a certain way, you make pictures in a certain way, probably certain colors, you feel things, contracted or expansive. Most people like tighten in their chest. All right, you have a lot of real estate in your brain that's linked to that behavior. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to do this new one. It's like a little pinky. It's like, oh, I'm going to think about this.
Yeah.
Oh, super. That'll work. Right. Because you're like, okay, under stress, which one are you going to do? The 7-lane super highway or this little dirt path? No way. You're going to go back. So what most people do is they don't make this new behavior strong enough and they don't destroy this one. So when we go 6 is like, all right, what does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? Right? What does it smell like? What does it taste like even? What's the energy? What's that movement? And it's stuff that you already create. It's like you already know it. But now you make that a 7-lane super highway. And then this one you start to destroy. Like, and we use metaphors of the Department of Transportation trucks, with those light bulbs, the arrows, and you got to go over and you got to thanks for letting me in, right? And you got the concrete things and you got to keep going. And pretty soon that old behavior, you go, all right, now you're in a parking lot, you're 3 lanes, traffic is stopped and you're just sitting there and you look over to see the right path. And then you go down that right path. So it's kind of a metaphor. But the message is you make this new behavior so real and you start to destroy and weaken this other one. And that's what most people don't do. They're like, they don't make this one strong enough and fast enough, because the stronger it is, also the faster it is. And so you have a whole body experience versus, oh yeah, I really want to be more patient. Okay, good. That's great. Nice. But what does patient feel like? What does it sound like? What does it look like? Where do you feel it in your body? And most we're like, I don't know. Yeah, no kidding. That's why you train it. So that's where people have just phenomenal results. Like I was like, I think this is really good. because I did yoga and breath work and all these things individually. But when I started putting them together, because like some people, you say hypnotherapy, they're like, no, I don't want to do that. All right. We hypnotize ourselves all the time. Like you're doing this and someone talked to you, you're like, what?
Huh?
You're deaf. You're deaf and blind for the moment. You're so focused on that. You can't even hear someone's right there. And they're like, huh? Huh? So we're in a trance state all the time anyway. So which do you want to be at the effect of that, or do you want to create that for yourself? But that is like, how do you create that? Another quick thing, like when we say, if someone has a problem or an issue, imagine where that would be. If that was a physical thing in space, where would it be? Guess where they say? Duh, right in front of you, and like there's a squid on your face.
Right.
Like, what? Wow. Like, of any place in the world that you could create that, you made it about a foot away. What if you put it behind you?
Mm-hmm.
What if you put it 300 yards behind you, or to your left, or underneath you? All of a sudden people are like, yeah, I don't have any emotion about it. Like, I realize it's a thing, but bring it back here. You're like, yeah, no kidding. Anything that fast, they either want to headbutt you or kiss you. So like, I don't know, like might be good, might not be good. So then you're like, all right, how can you move that in space? And that's a skill. It's like, so you start with maybe drawing a box, and you change the color lines or the background color or the width, and then put it to the right, put it to the left, behind you, above you, below you. And then you just get good at moving a thing, right? It's a way to train. Then you go, all right, now take that issue, put that issue behind you. Now we're talking. That's like, oh, I did an ice bath. Hoo-yah, great. What is your ice bath moment in your life? That's the money. That's where you get the result.
That's where we apply it. Absolutely. Yeah. So Jim, we talked earlier about, or I teased earlier about the place to go where you can train. We called it the Mind Gym, right? Would you let us know?
Yeah, it sounds like a great thing. I definitely want to join. Yeah, so I appreciate it. So I created an app called Mind Gym Bro, and it's actually 70 different training sessions and growing. We always add new ones. And you can go, if you're interested, mindgymbro.com. Mind, the word mind, GYMBRO, mindgymbro, all one word, .com. And there's a couple free audio trainings that you can go through. One is on building your own mind gym, and the other one is called the Equalizer. And it's just a really fast and practical tool that not instantly, you train it. But once you train it, you can make it instantly. Like you move that equalizer and you train. Some people may use a dial. We have that too. So yeah, it's a training tool. And the first weeks is like basic training. The first 6 weeks is basic training. You get one training session a day because you need the foundation, right? A lot of people try meditation, they quit. So like, it doesn't work. Yeah. All right. So we'll go through breath practice, all these different things. And then after those 6 weeks, then everything's available. So you get an additional 30 something training sessions on sleep, on performance, on relationships, on taking different perspectives, on getting into different states. And then of course you can always go back and do the other ones as well. So yeah, mindgymbro.com. Yeah, we have a bunch of members, and the feedback, I mean, I'm thrilled because, you always think like, I think it's useful. I think people like it, and it's really been powerful for folks. So I'm thrilled. I'm humbled too, and just really happy.
Amazing. I love it. Right. And I will say that your offer is an amazing offer. It's priced so well. And I think people really need to come and take a look at what you're doing, because this is powerful stuff. It's whole person training. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to be on with us. I really appreciate you, and all that you've done for us in our training and our development as well.
Well, you guys walk the talk. I love, I remember when we first met, you were both kind of traveling all around the country, and you'd send updates on where you were. And I love that you guys both do it together, as a couple, which is amazing. And I think you have so much love, but you also have respect for each other, which is just beautiful to see. And you're out there making things happen. I know podcasts are not easy. It takes so much time and resources. And you guys, you really do your homework, and you're really good at it. You make it easy. And